Hey, how's it going? And today we are going to go just a little into the weeds and take a look at this constructor in the verse language. And I'm doing this because it can be a little confusing. And in this documentation here, I think that this might be a typo because it says arg1 here, but then it just says arg here. And I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be arg1 as well. But all we're going to do is kind of just go over this section right here, and maybe later we'll get into the weeds in a separate tutorial on some of this other stuff. We'll just go straight off what it says in here. What is a constructor? It is a special function that creates an instance of the class that it's associated with. It can be used to set the initial values for the new object. Now, if you were to copy this code here into a blank project, you're going to get errors right up here, but if you put a 1 there, that error will go away. So what I tried to do is come up with an example that's easy to follow. All I have is a verse device in the scene, and the rest of this is in the code. So let's take a look at that right now. Here, what we're doing is we're creating a class called shapeProp. And in it, we define 3 properties and 2 methods. So here's our 3 properties, and here's our 2 methods here. So this method is fully implemented. This one is pending. So I just have it set to block. So this is a non-functioning method at the moment. We have 3 properties, a string, an int, and a vector3. We have this createColor method, and then we have this self-destruct method to be defined later. So let's say now we want to make an instance of this class that we've created right here. So what we can do is we come down here to where our creative device begins, and I can go my first instance. I can reference boxProp up here, the class equals boxProp. And then inside these curly braces, I have to initialize those fields. I cannot not do this. So you'll see it's a little bit more work to initialize an instance of the class because I need to put the name, the colon equals operator, and then the actual data. And I have to do that across the board. So it's a little bit more work to do because I'm kind of repeating what I've written up here. But this does create my first instance, which is an instance of the boxProp class. Now let's say I wanted to use a constructor function to create it instead. So what I've done here is I've created a constructor here, a constructor function. We call it makeBoxProp, and it has a construction specifier here. We write it like we're writing a function where we have our input parameters which line up with the properties of our class up here. And then this is where I was getting actually confused, and I think this is confusing, is this is not a return type like a normal function, but actually what we're doing is we're taking the boxProp class and assigning it to. So this is our constructor function right here, our special function. So then I have my creative device I built here. Here I've created my first instance, but there's nothing special about it. This is just an instance of this class, a regular old instance. Now down here on begins play, we can create an instance of the class using the constructor function here. So here we call makeBoxProp, and you notice how we initialize it here. We initialize it as if we're calling a function, whereas here we have to spell things out a little bit more. This is easier to do because we're just calling it like we would call any other function. So we call makeBoxProp and we call it, and then we create what I'm calling constructor instance 1. And then we're going to call it again, and we're going to make 2 instances using this constructor function, and one is going to be called constructor instance 1 and one is called constructor instance 2. So now we have 3 instances in the scene. We've got my first instance, which you could just call a regular instance. And then we've got 2 instances that we made using the constructor function. And all of these instances are fully initialized. They have to be. Well, what can we do with all this? Now that we have our instances, Well, we're just going to play around with printing some stuff out. So in this one, I reference constructor instance 1, and I can call its properties like I'm calling almost like a method, is with the dot operator, and go size. So I'm calling this constructor instance 1 here, and I'm referencing the size property, and I'm assigning that to a constant called vector1. Once I have that done, I can then print out the value of vector1 here. I'm going to do the same thing for the constructor instance 2. I'm going to call for its size, its property, access its field, and then I'm going to assign that to a constant vector2 and then print out its value. Here we're going to call the first instance that we made without using the constructor function, and we're going to call the create color method, which is here, and it needs 3 input values that are integers, so we provide those, and this should be the color red, and we assign that to the color here, a color type, and then we print a string, and we're going to assign that to color, so that we'll see that this string should print out red. And now we're going to do the same thing again, except this time we're going to be calling our constructor instance 1 create color, and this time, so this should give us green. We're assigning it to color RGB1 constant, and then we're going to print that out as well. So let's take a quick look at that. I come in here, the code should already be compiled. 4 print strings is what we should see. So we come in here, hit start, and you'll see we've got our 2 fields that we accessed on size, the color red, which is our first instance, and then the color green for our constructor function instance that we created. So that's all seems to be working fine. To kind of summarize a little bit what we talked about, why use a constructor? Because this comes up, I see this quite a bit in threads and different threads, and there seems to be confusion about it. They're used to set the initial values of classed instances or objects. So a classed instance or an object is basically the same thing. They ensure validity and consistency of initialization because they require that they be initialized with data when they're created. So it ensures that everything's in place. They're also easier to use, and this is just real superficial here. It's easier to do this, to just send the values, than to have to name the values. So when you use a constructor, it's actually easier. It's as easy as calling a function, and it also supports partial updates as well. It also goes along with some of the core principles of object-oriented programming, which supports hiding data, or what they call encapsulation, and it also supports delegation because one constructor can delegate to another. That's shown in this part here, but we'll save that for another tutorial. So anyway, I hope you found this helpful. Take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.